Hello, everyone.
Hi, Gina.
I'm gonna face up because
Yes.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
Okay. Luna, can you pray for us?
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen.
Okay. Good morning or afternoon, I guess now. So my understanding is we're doing a series on God's fingerprints in our lives, and the idea of I know Ray spoke not last week but the week before on the idea of faith, and you'll be speaking about faithfulness and this whole idea of our relationship with God in that perspective. And I'm in the middle here speaking about waiting on God. So we'll just kind of jump in. And if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Okay. What do I do? Just 1 second. My screen's not moving. There we are. I'm sorry? I have to wait on God for it to load, I'm being told. So we're learning as we go here. I can minimize it? Okay. Oh, that's right. You guys can see it. Okay. So I want this to be our backdrop. Okay. So kind of just like we'll talk about it a little bit more as we continue, but basically I just want us to kind of keep this in mind as our backdrop as we kind of go into this discussion. So Saint Porphyrios is an Eastern Orthodox saint on Mount Athos, and so he's Greek Orthodox. And he says this, he says, "Whatever you want, my Lord, whatever your love desires, place me where your love wishes. I abandon myself to your love. If you want to place me in hell, then do so. Only don't let me lose your love." And it's from his book, Wounded by Love. When I first read this quote, it really shook me just the way he was like, he abandoned himself completely to God, that even to the point of saying, if you want to place me in hell, then do so. And whether that's like eternal, or just like sometimes we go through things in our lives where we feel like it's hell, but he's saying, like, abandon myself to your love, and that's all his desire is. So I just want us to be our backdrop. We'll go we'll go into it a little bit more as we continue. So to start with, I want us to jog our memories because I don't want this to be like a theoretical something that we just discuss and then move on with our lives. So I want us to think about what are we waiting for? What's on your heart that you're waiting on God for? These are different things that I thought of that we could be potentially waiting on God for, whether it's a job opportunity or advancement in our career, whether it's a certain relationship or marriage, whether it's conceiving children if we're already married, whether it's a problem that we're seeking for it to be solved, whether it's at work or with family. It could be healing. That could be any sort of healing if we're waiting on God for physical healing or spiritual healing or psychological or emotional healing. That could be for ourselves or a loved one, or like possibly we're waiting for a loved one that's, far away from the church, whatever it may be. Whether it be maybe God to open a door of some sort, or waiting for him to respond in a certain aspect of our lives, or to provide some sort of answer. There are many things where we're waiting on God, right? And so I kind of want you to take a second to really think about what currently are you waiting on God for? And let that be kind of what you think of when we go through this discussion, because I want this to be practical and something that we can really take something from. So take a second to think of you fall in any of these categories or possibly something else where you're waiting on God for something in your life. And then as you think of that, I want us to think of what does the experience of waiting look like? So as right now you're waiting on God, what does that look like? What are your thoughts about the situation? What are your emotions about the situation? Like, how are you feeling about the whole thing? What does it look like to wait on God? And so these are some things that I thought of that potentially we could be experiencing as we're waiting on God. We could potentially be anxious. Okay, so we have anxiety, where we're worried about our future or outcomes. We're not really sure what's going to happen. We're waiting on God for something and it's uncertain. Potentially, the experience of waiting could look like pain or heartache, depending on what you're going through. If you're waiting on healing or a certain difficult circumstance or situation, there could be pain or heartache associated with it. There could be loneliness if you feel isolated and you're kind of waiting on something to happen or someone to happen, and it's just not happening. And there's just a lot of loneliness associated with that. There could be doubt in God's goodness or his love. And that's associated with like defeating thoughts and emotions of hopelessness, where we're not really sure of his goodness and his love for us. And so we get these thoughts that are in our heads about, hopelessness. And it's just like, it's never going to happen, whatever it is. And we're feeling like discouragement. We could feel a loss of control or confusion about the circumstance. We're not sure why we're in the circumstance. We're not sure what to do with the circumstance. We're not sure what the outcome is going to be. Also waiting, depending on what you're waiting for, you could be thinking like that you're unworthy of whatever the gift is that you are waiting for God to do in your life, okay? Or like to act in your life. You could feel like you're left out or left behind or forgotten. These are all certain things that we could be thinking about as we experience waiting. Does that kind of resonate with you guys, or do you feel like it's just me who waits like this? Yeah? Yeah, so I feel like this could be a pretty common experience of waiting. I've spoken to a few people, and I feel like this is kind of generally our stance when we're waiting. So why is waiting, looks like, pretty difficult. So why is waiting difficult? Why are we experiencing all of these things? And so Ruth Burrows, who's actually she's a Carmelite nun in the Catholic Church. She writes this book, and it's called To Believe in Jesus. I was told to read it a few years ago. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I highly, highly recommend it. It's not too big. It's just like a small little book, and really, what it talks about is if you believe what you actually say that you believe, what would your life look like? So she talks about like different aspects of like our Christian faith. And if we actually believe these certain aspects that we say that we believe, how would that actually look in our life? And how would it change the way we thought about things and the way we interacted and how we went about our day to day? So in one of the chapters in this book, the chapter is called The Pain of Being Human. And she talks about this idea of the pain of being human. And so the part I really want to highlight here is she says, failure to accept the innate poverty of our human condition leaves us dominated by anxiety. And so as we can see, like when we're waiting, there's anxiety, okay? And so why are we anxious as we wait? It's because we actually fail to accept the poverty of our human condition. We fail to accept the fact that we're human, that we are actually utterly dependent. We are dependent on our very breath, like of the most basic things, let alone like our career and our life and things that we're given and our gifts and our everything, our very breath we're utterly dependent on God for. And because we fail to accept this human condition of our utter dependence on God, we continue to seek control and grasp for control as if we had control. And that's what leaves us anxious. She continues to say, we are God's dear children and must live as such. This means we must die to our self-protection, self-approval, self-sufficiency, and this means the death of every fear. Again, it's this idea of we're anxious, we're afraid of whatever it is that's of the outcome, whatever we're waiting on God for, and we're not sure how it's going to turn out. She's saying what we must do to deal with that, to deal with these fears, is to live as we are children of God, which we are, right? And so she's saying, when we understand that we are children of God, then we die to our self-protection. Then we often think that I often think that if I don't protect myself, then I'm not protected. If I don't plan for myself, then there is no plan. If I don't take control, then no one is in control and it's chaos, But that's not the case. The case is we are beloved children of God. And if we're beloved children of God, then he's got this, You see like a little toddler, back to the toddler life, which is wonderful, where we didn't have worries. No toddler is wondering if there's going to be food on the table for dinner. No toddler is wondering, I wonder if I'm going to be clothed tomorrow. No toddler is worrying like, will I be taken care of? Will I have a place to sleep tonight? Because they're dependent on their father. Their father's taking care of it. So they live with no fear, no anxiety, nothing like that. And that's really what we're called to do. God says, Jesus Christ says to his disciples, to return to be like little children, right? And I remember hearing this commentary that it's little children. It's not even just children. It's not a 10-year-old. It's little children. It's infant. It's toddler who's completely dependent on their father to take care of everything. And when we do that, when we let go of our self-sufficiency, where we don't think that we are sufficient on our own to plan for ourselves and to protect ourselves, that's when actually we're then given freedom. We live freely. Toddlers are free. They just do whatever they want. They're not worried. They're not anxious. They're not like, they're not bogged down by their thoughts about tomorrow and their worries about tomorrow. They are free to experience today and the joy of today, as it is, right? And so what's really important for us is to learn to just go back to being children loved by our Father. And then she goes on to say, trust is the only answer to our suffering state. Okay, so it's the state of, whether it's like waiting on God or just understanding like the innate poverty of our human condition. Trust is the only answer to our suffering state. She says, a trust which leads us to accept with all our heart that God is our Father, Abba. And in that sureness, go on without understanding. That is key for us to go on without understanding. Okay? I don't know about you. Often I want to understand. I say things like, God, may your will be done. You could do whatever you want with me. If you can just tell me in advance, that would be awesome. If you can just, we go to job interviews, and like, what's your 5-year plan? And it's like, if God would just tell me my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan, that would be wonderful. I can surrender to it. No problem. Just tell me what it is. That is not the idea of having a loving Father, but understanding that tomorrow is in his hands, and the day after, and the next 5 years or 10 years are in the hands of our loving Father. Then we can go on and say, we can go on without having to understand. All right. So, sorry, 1 second. Okay, so the key to trust is faith, which is what you guys talked about last week, right? And so how do we get faith, right? Because for us to learn to trust God, we have to have a relationship with him, because I'm not going to trust anybody that just like a stranger that just walks up or that I don't know very well, right? And so for us to be talking about trusting ourselves completely to someone, I must get to know that someone. I must understand his love for me, or else I'm not going to be able to do any of these things that we just talked about. Which kind of leads me into my next point. For us to really have faith and to be able to trust God with our futures or whatever it is that we're waiting on, we must be seeking God and not the gift that we're waiting for. Okay? So I'm just going to be like, pause kind of for a second. I just want to be real for a second here about something. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I have been taught growing up that, if I continue seeking the gift, whatever it is that I'm looking to God for, whatever it is that I'm waiting on, okay, nothing's wrong with that. And, I was taught like, so you wait on God and you pray and you be faithful and you seek him diligently and you continue praying for and hoping in him. And, the famous line, and in God's timing, You know, whatever it is that I'm waiting on, whatever it is that I'm waiting for will come. Okay, which I think is wonderful. And we know so many stories that we've heard of, you know, Hannah who prayed and prayed and prayed and got Samuel. We hear about Abraham and Sarah waited like, I don't know, 100 years to get the promised child, Isaac. We get like Zachariah and Elizabeth, and it says they were righteous people and they were faithful people, wonderful people who waited on God, and they get John the Baptist, which is amazing, right? So, you know, we hear this and it's like, okay, so I keep praying, I keep asking, I keep seeking, and it will come. But what that implies is the gift is guaranteed, which is not the case. That's only one side of the story. Yes, you know, Hannah did get Samuel, but there are many women who aren't able to conceive, right? And so the idea is whatever you're waiting on is not guaranteed. And so we need to shift our focus from the gift to the giver. We need to shift our focus to seek him instead of seeking whatever it is that is our heart's desire. That does not mean that we do not ask God for our heart's desire, and I'll talk about that near the end. It just means that that is not my focus. That's not what I'm continuously thinking about. And then there's this verse I feel like is highly misunderstood, or I was taught it like this. I was taught it, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Awesome, fantastic, feel-good verse, you know? And I thought, you know, it meant if I love Jesus and I'm trying to be faithful to him, and I'm trying to be like the good Christian and do what I need to do, he will give me the desires of my heart, whatever it is that I'm waiting on, whatever it is that I'm waiting for, right? But what I'm learning is it's supposed to be delight yourself in the Lord, period. Okay? And then my heart's desires will align with his. Okay? So this idea of he'll give you the desires of your heart is based on the fact that I have sought him, period. Sought him for the sake of him. Sought him for relationship with him, period. When I delight myself in the Lord, the desires of my heart are then transformed through relationship with him to align with his desires. And when that's the case, he will give me the desires of my heart because that is his desire for me and for my holiness and for my path. And so what I really want us to kind of change our mindset a little bit about waiting on God is it's not this idea of I do what I need to do and I delight myself in God and I pray and I'm diligent for the sake of getting the gift. My focus is the gift, okay? I want us to have a mindset change of I want to seek Christ, period. So, Father Jacques spoke last week, which was just perfect timing, I thought, to really fit into this series. If you have not heard the talks, I highly, highly suggest you do. You go back and listen to them. But he talks about this idea of the present moment, which I really want to focus on. So he says, every moment, whatever it brings, is filled with God's presence, rich with the possibility of communion with God. We do not commune with God in the past or the future, but by welcoming each instant as the place where he gives himself. When we are focused on our future and not on the present moment, we miss the experience of God in the present moment. God is outside of time. So he's in my past, he's in my present, he's in my future. I, however, I'm not in the past and I am not in the future. I am only in the present. And if I am only in the present, that means the only place where I can actually encounter God is in the present moment. If my mind is wandering and thinking about my future, then I actually miss the opportunity to commune with God right now. Okay? So the only way that we're going to actually have an opportunity to encounter God and to commune with him, to have this intimate union with him, is right now in the present moment. Because in this present moment, okay, is where God offers himself to you and to me, okay? And so what is he offering? As he offers himself in this present moment, right now, today, he's offering me his love. Right now, today, he offers me his joy. He offers me his peace. He offers me his grace right now, today. So in terms of offering me his grace, we know this verse from 2 Corinthians. It says, St. Paul is saying that he, as in God, said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So God gives grace sufficient for today. So I'm not saying that as things are in our heart and we desire things in our heart, that sometimes it's a painful process. Sometimes, as I said, there's pain associated with it. There's loneliness. There are things that my heart desires, or there's troubles for today. And we're not taking away from that. But God gives grace for just today. If I am worried about today and tomorrow and the next 5 years, okay, the grace isn't for the next 5 years. The grace is for today. And tomorrow I get a renewed amount of grace. And actually, Father Jacques speaks about in his book about the Israelites and the manna. And as you guys know, the Israelites in the desert used to get manna for one day, okay? You couldn't hoard it. You couldn't take some for tomorrow. And so you were just able to go, you got what you needed, sufficient for today, and you trusted God that God tomorrow would provide again, okay? And he provides for each person their needs for that day. And specific people might have different needs, and at specific times in our lives you might require a different amount of grace. Father Jacques also spoke about, which I thought was beautiful, this idea of martyrs. We often think oh man, if I was ever in a situation where I was put and somebody had a gun to my head and said deny Jesus, what would I do? And he's saying we don't need to worry about that, because he gives grace sufficient for the moment. I don't need that amount of grace today. I just need the amount of grace for me to get through today. Tomorrow, depending on what I'm going through, depending on my circumstances, depending on what's going on in my life, I get another amount of grace. Could be more, could be less, depending on what I need. The idea is to trust that in the present moment, I receive grace sufficient for today. In Psalm 34, it says, "O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints. There is no want to those who fear him. The young lions lack and suffer hunger, but those who seek the Lord shall not lack any good thing." Okay, so the first verse, taste and see that the Lord is good. This is the idea of experiencing God. We are asked to taste him, experience him, see him today, experience his love and joy today, experience that the Lord is good. And it says, blessed is the man who trusts in him, because if I experience his goodness today, then I have no fear of tomorrow, because he who is with me today, who loves me today, who takes care of me today, who's providing grace enough for today, peace enough for today, despite my circumstances, then I can trust that he's going to do the exact same thing tomorrow and the next day. It says, there's no want to those who fear him. I often feel in our lives, it's from one want to another. It's from one desire to another. I reach something and I desire something else. Now I'm waiting on something else, I get that and then I'm waiting on something else. I'm living my whole life just waiting, But it says there's no want to those who fear him. And this isn't fear him, as you guys know, context. It's not I'm scared of him. This is in awe. In awe of what? Because I just tasted and saw him. So when I actually experience him and taste him and see him, I'm in awe. That's the fear. It's this reverent, loving awe of my Father who's taking care of things. So if that's the way I live my life, then there is no want. Then there's nothing else that I need. Because really, what else do we need? Then communion and union with our Creator, our beloved, than right now. Okay, what else do we need other than that? So it says, but those who seek the Lord shall lack no good thing. Waiting for this to load. There we go. Okay. To continue on this thought, it says, sometimes, or Father Jacques says, sometimes, though, it isn't worry that causes us to focus on the future. I thought this was interesting. We spend like anxiety and worry, but sometimes it's not worry, he says, but the hope of something better or happier. We may spend our whole lives waiting to live. Thus, we risk not fully accepting the reality of our present lives. Okay? The grass is always greener on the other side. It's this idea of when this happens, I will be better off. When this happens, I will be happier. Okay? Whatever I'm waiting on, I'm waiting for it to live, to actually experience life and love and joy, and I'm waiting on something. But we may spend our whole lives waiting and missing the present moment, missing the joys of everyday life in our union with God and in fellowship with our fellow human beings and our friends and things that God has given us, right? So we risk not fully accepting the reality of our present lives and not actually ever living. When I read this, I think, what a shame, because I live my life in this state, So I feel like, what a shame. What a shame that we spend our whole lives waiting and not experiencing communion with God in the here and now and the joy that he has for us in the here and now. So this brings us to the quote that I started with. Because when I'm seeking him and I'm seeking a relationship with him, and I experience and I taste and I see union with God and what joy that could bring to my life, then I can join one day St. Porphyrios in saying this: whatever you want, my Lord, whatever your love desires. This is a person who has experienced the love of God. This is a person who has experienced the love of a father through union, through seeking him and him alone. Once I'm able to experience that love of the Father and union with him, then I can say such things like, wherever your love wishes. It says, I abandon myself to your love. Complete surrender. We think surrender, or I think, surrender is hard. It's like, I'm just gonna let go. It's just kida, but it's not kida. It's not letting go into thin air and it's just gonna go wherever. It's, I abandon myself to your love. Who am I abandoning myself to? To God, who has offered everything to me. To God, who left, the glory of heaven to come down for me. I'm abandoning myself to love himself. We say love is not a characteristic of God. It is who he is. Okay, so who am I abandoning myself to is a person. I'm abandoning myself to love himself. And then I can say such things, even if you want to place me in hell. Because if that's what your love desires for me, then that's the best thing for me, okay? He's saying, only don't let me lose your love. That's all I want. I want to experience your love here and now, period. And then wherever you take me, I abandon myself to your love. St. Paisios, who's also of Mount Athos, says, completely have trust in God, leave everything in his hands, and believe that his love will act for your own benefit. Then God will take care of everything, because there's nothing he cannot do. Everything is easy for him. The difficult thing is for man to decide to humble himself and leave everything to God's providence and love. So the first part of that quote we've kind of already discussed. It's to have complete trust in him, okay? And to let his love act. I don't need to worry about it because his love is acting for my own benefit. And in having trust, and to go back a little bit, to what Ray spoke about 2 weeks ago, it's just having this faith in a person, okay? Just to have complete trust in him that whatever he does is for my own benefit. He says he will take care of everything because there's nothing he can't do. So whatever it is that is the desire of your heart, he can do it, okay? Everything is easy for him. The issue is not on his end, okay? The difficult thing is for me to humble myself and to leave everything in his providence and in his providence and love, you know? And this goes back to what we discussed about Ruth Burroughs at the beginning, which is for me to humble myself to say, I'm completely dependent. I am your child, okay? I completely leave everything in your hands. And I no longer seek to grasp and control and try to plan everything, okay? So it's the difficult thing is for me to say, okay, Lord, I leave it in your hands and I let your love act on my behalf as you are my Father. So, kind of wrapping up here, I wanted to just go back to say this. So, this is where we started. We talked about the experience of waiting, and I had this slide up, and this is what it looked like, just to kind of review where we were and hopefully where we're moving towards. So, the experience of waiting looked like anxiety, worry, pain, loneliness, doubt, a loss of control, confusion, defeating thoughts of hopelessness, thoughts of being unworthy or left behind or forgotten. What if we changed our mindset so waiting potentially looks like this? The experience of waiting could maybe look like this. It's actually enjoying union with God in the present moment. And then having that union with him in the present moment, then I experience love and joy in the midst of my present situation, whatever that looks like. And as I experience love and joy in my present situation, I also experience God's grace. As I said, we're not negating the fact that sometimes we're in difficult situations, okay? And, Christ himself says, in this world you will have tribulations, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world, right? So in union with him, we have victory, we have that joy. And so he says, experiencing God's grace is sufficient for today. Despite the difficulties, despite the pain, I experience his grace for today. What if the experience of waiting looked more like accepting my position as his child? And what that means, being his child, is that I'm utterly dependent, but I'm also deeply, deeply loved. And from that standpoint, then I can ask, okay, so as his children, we have a right given by him as his children to ask for our heart's desire, okay? So from a place of humbling ourselves as his children, then I can ask for my heart's desire. But then my hope is not in that gift that I'm seeking, okay? I can ask for my heart's desire, but then my hope would be that his love will act for my benefit. So one thing that I actually really loved that Ray said in his talk, and I'm going to repeat it, he said that faith does not equal resignation. So it's not a resigning. It's not like, okay, God's will be done. Like, khalas, throw my hands up in the air. Like, I can't do anything about it anyways. So whatever. Okay. I feel like, that's not faith. It's not faith, right? That's resignation. And he said something that was really awesome. He said, resignation leads to resentment, which is sometimes our state as we're waiting, because we've kind of resigned to our present situation. We're not really enjoying it. Okay, we're not actually experiencing God's love or joy or presence in our present situation. And so we've just resigned things, and it leads us to resentment. But he said, faith leads us to love. It's this understanding of, I have faith in a person. I love a person, and I understand that that person loves me abundantly. And then from that perspective, I can say, Lord, I seek this. I desire this. I wait on you for this or that or the other. However, in saying, Lord, may your will be done, really what I'm saying is, Lord, may your love act on my behalf. May your love act for my benefit. So I'm hoping this will be our experience of waiting rather than my previous slide that looked like this. That's all I have to say. Glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. Any questions, thoughts, comments from anybody?
Can you go back to the original quote from St. Blasius?
From St. Porphyrios?
Porphyrius, sorry.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who says, if your God can somehow think that it's a good idea to put me in hell and that I'm supposed to accept that as love, I want nothing to do with it?
Good question. So here are my thoughts on that, is that this comes from a person who deeply understands the love of God. This is not, to hear that question is somebody who doesn't experience God. So saying like, I want nothing to do with a God that his love would mean I'm going to end up in hell. Okay, is somebody who is not experiencing what the love of God looks like. The love of God is crucifixion. The love of God caused, like his love for us caused him to go through hell, through the crucifixion and then literally Hades. And so in loving us, he has gone through many tribulations and many things for the sake of loving us. And so if his will and his love for me means that I actually get to experience that with him, it's actually, he says, only don't let me lose your love. And I think that's the key. It's the idea that like, even hell will be pleasant, quote unquote, because I'm in union with him. Hell on my own is unbearable. Okay. And I think that's where we like maybe sometimes find ourselves, is we're like, this situation is hell. This sucks,
And just
Yeah.
for clarity's sake,
Yeah.
the hell that the person I am referencing,
Yeah.
the person who knows nothing about God, the hell that he is referring to is always alone. The hell that St. Porphyrios is referring to is really not hell at all.
Right.
And this is where I think we sometimes we see words and we see them as provocative, and we don't actually understand what they're pointing to. Because for him to say, only don't let me lose your love, he's literally saying, be with me in hell. And what kind of hell would hell be if Christ is present? That's not hell at all. Because on the cross, where the Father was still united to his Son who was crucified, is that really hell? Even that suffering is transformative. Even that suffering is healing. And for us to think that hell is nothing more than external circumstances, then I think this is where we need to mature in our knowledge of what it means to actually wait on God.
I hope everybody heard that. Yes. Anybody else? Okay. Wonderful. I guess we will conclude in prayer. Should I stop sharing? Okay, we're going to conclude in prayer. Abuna is going to pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.